So we're going to talk about 3 strategies to accelerate the creative process. And before we dive into the strategies, I want to give a little background as to why this is important. If you're in a trend-driven market, so if you're delivering product, be it physical product like shoes or baby food, or you're delivering a product like a commercial, a TV show, the faster you can innovate and the faster you can deliver innovative new product, the better your results will be. And there's been studies that prove this, as we'll share. So if we look at 2 brands that have entered into a market that we now refer to as athleisure, we look at Lululemon and L Brands, you can see that one of them far outperforms the other. In the beginning, they were side by side. They were following the same pattern in their stock price. But all of a sudden, Lululemon jumped ahead. And there's a reason why Lululemon jumped ahead. They were able to create innovative new products and actually define what the athleisure segment was. They did that by designing their own fabrics to uniquely support this new market. They used trend analysis and marketing to do that effort, and then quickly innovated, tested, analyzed the feasibility of the new product, and put product out on the shelf. And by doing that process faster, they were able to drive 50% plus gross margin consistently for their brands. If we look at L Brands was kind of stuck. They weren't delivering what the market really wanted. The market was basically unimpressed with their new products. They had to extend their normal sales cycle so that the sale went longer, which still didn't really drive much demand, and they ended up with excess merchandise, which of course led to declining margins. So it's one proof point that shows if you do start to truly innovate in a way that supports coming trends, you really can drive growth. But you have to do that quickly to stay ahead of your competitors. What we see from a report from McKinsey & Company is that over the past decade, only the top 20% of fashion companies have delivered the largest economic profit in the industry. Why is that? It goes back to those companies in that industry were able to very quickly get new product that customers wanted to market, while other companies were falling behind. They were sort of laggards in adopting to those trends. So it really is important to not only do the analysis, follow the trend, look for oncoming trends, and then be prepared. But once you are prepared, be able to very quickly go through the whole cycle of what we refer to as product creative lifecycle management. And it's really all the way from design to test to sell in to manufacture and get it out the door on the shelves or make it available online, and speeding up that whole cycle. Now, there's a lot of steps in here. If you're in the fashion industry, you're typically going to have a material and fabric library. If that material and fabric library is physical, then you have to wait for that material to come in. If that can be digital, you can speed up that process of picking different fabrics, different textures, putting them together in your design, and then do some analysis, get some sell-in work done to actually determine, is this going to sell, get approval, go on through manufacturing, start doing your photo shoots, maybe your commercials, start delivering collateral to your resellers, the retail stores, start preparing for print ads, for TV ads, start publishing out, all the way up to the point where you're actually ready to deliver product to the shelves along with the collateral to support it. We're going to talk about the different ways that you can enhance this start to finish life cycle through digitization and through some interesting transformation capabilities. There's lots of points of integration that can add to this whole life cycle. So for example, for your materials and your fabric, and for manufacturing plants, for models, for talent, being able to collect the data about all those entities, keep track of all of that data, perhaps manage contracts associated with a manufacturing facility or the company producing the material that you're going to use to create your product, or the models you're going to use for your photo shoots, or the talent that are going to be involved in your ads, whether they're print or TV. Managing all of that together as part of this creative lifecycle management is important. It may not be important to the creatives designing the shoe, for example, but it's important to the business. So keeping that in mind as you're flowing through this product creative lifecycle is important, and that could involve many different systems. So the ability to handle that in one system would certainly add value as well. So what Lisa's going to do is she's going to dive a little deeper into the details for exactly how can you accelerate your product or creative product introduction. How can you accelerate from start to finish? Can you do it all at once? Should you do it in piecemeal? Or should you really go as deep as possible in the integration of all of these processes and all of this data to get to a better end result that will drive better business results? So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to dive deeper.
Thank you, Derek. So I'm sure everybody's just waiting right now to just find out what exactly are those strategies for accelerating the product and or product creative life cycle. So how do we do that? How does Lululemon stay on top of the trends to be able to get something out a little bit faster? How can you get ahead of the trends and to see where changes are occurring in the market to create that creative content, those layouts, that collateral that needs to be delivered to the store? So what we're going to try and take a look at today, that ultimately we have three separate strategies. The first one is if we take a look back, and we will in just a second, at our chart, what Derek described is the full end-to-end process. And the first strategy that we'll go into is the idea of being able to optimize a single process, so something directly within there. That may be well and good and get you enough time to get back into the market and to stay ahead of your competition. But if you can, you might decide to go ahead and tie multiple processes together. So go ahead and create optimizations in separate ones and then tie them together. And then lastly, you might decide to go ahead and just dive in and go into deeper integrations and try and get some of that data that you're creating around your creatives and your product and actually get them into the system to actually bring about a more holistic look at your content and actually shorten the time that it takes for you to get from concept to delivery. And usually the scaling and accelerating of the process has proven difficult because for many of the world's largest companies, there's just a tangled web of applications and processes that people are trying to get through. So hopefully we can get rid of some of that web and get you into a better looking day. Okay, so first off, let's take a look at optimizing a single process. And for this, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the materials and fabric development library. So within this example, we may be focusing on one particular part because obviously if we took the time to dive into optimizing each of these parts, from soup to nuts, if you will. We could spend all day talking about it. There's really a whole lot of opportunity within here to shorten the cycle. And even as we get into the more traditional dam area of things at the far right of this graph, anything that we do before the creative process will actually shorten the time to market with some of the output that you have to do. Okay, so if I know what my product's going to look like early in the process, I can go ahead and mock up those layouts before we even have the real product created. So let's take a look at the materials and fabric library. So when it comes to materials and textures, so these are often the very complex files that are used to show and give, well, for lack of a better word, texture to the objects and the products that you're creating. So let's say you have a shirt that you want to design. It may be that you need to have what exactly that fabric will look like. If it's a t-shirt, where does the shadow hit? How does the light look on that actual t-shirt itself? And so what people use to give life to their drawings and to add that dimension are called materials. And what we had heard from many of our clients is that when it comes to these libraries, they are oftentimes hard to find. As with many of the processes involved with creatives, things are siloed. Information exists on hard drives, they exist in file shares, and oftentimes they could exist in another system, but you just can't find it. Or you have a system to store these, but the complexity of the files and the formats used to create these texture maps are becoming more and more difficult, and you just can't keep up with the formats that go into this. And as I said before, you know, part of the issues around being able to find some of the materials is that they're often stored in different systems with low visibility to the people who actually need to see them. It could be in many traditional instances that the materials, which are created by a materials tech, exist in their file share and are not searchable by those people, the designers, the product designers, who actually need to get a hold of those textures quickly, okay? So oftentimes, again, a very common DAM sort of use case here is that your files can get out of date, or it could be that somebody's downloaded content or a material that you just don't have the inventory anymore. And you can go through the whole development process without even knowing that this object is available. So, you know, you can just think about the power of seeing this information. At me as a designer, if I can follow some of the process in the creation of these materials libraries, then I can get more real-time information and actually be able to see the materials themselves as part of my design and prototype process. Okay. So again, in our example here, we're talking about 3D texture maps as kind of complex objects, but if you wanted to, you can extend this idea to your layout files, whether that be in Illustrator or InDesign or Photoshop, and being able to understand the complexity that goes into some of these files, okay? And so within the materials process, as I said, things are oftentimes siloed. So you have a designer, we'll call him John. John oftentimes needs to create the zip or the layered file that gives kind of texture to the material itself. And then we have another user here, Julie, who needs to actually render the file itself so that downstream we can get a good sense for the file. If we're all in the system, we can go ahead and John can upload the file. Julie can take care of the creation of the rendering. And then Vincent, the approver here, can actually approve the texture and publish it out to people downstream. And if you stopped at this process right here, you'd probably have a pretty good sense, and you'd be able to kind of have something that looks like this. And somewhat difficult to see here, sorry, but in this top left-hand corner, there's actually texture to it. If you get a little closer to the screen, and sorry, it's very difficult to get a screenshot that captures the full sense of what we've got going on with this file. But we've got the texture file that is actually comprised of all of these nested files right here, okay? And within your DAM, you can house all of these objects and create the previews and the renderings that are important for those people downstream. Along with that, you can get the information that goes along with this texture file. Who is the manufacturer? What are some of the information, the camera information or other metadata that needs to go along with this file itself? So we know that a texture file isn't just a zip that somebody needs to get to. If this texture file resided in a file share as a zip, well, you know, the time it takes to actually get into it, to see what it looks like, it's very time consuming. You have to uncompress it, download it, you know, it's a lot of wasted time. So by having something here in the system that everybody can go through and can actually see a visual representation, it's pretty compelling. Okay. So again, that's the end of our first process. And we could stop there, and we've probably saved our company a little bit of time. So, you know, it's really useful. Strategy one, get one process nailed down, do it well, and go from there. But let's say we've actually got some downstream users. Okay, we've created that texture file. Now that texture file can actually be used by the designer to go into the next part of the process. And what we're going to do here and take a look at is the idea of tying together the materials and fabrics library along with the product design or that creative design, and then the sell-in. And in our product sample, in the traditional sense, this was actually, we would have a designer who was getting hold of the materials, putting something together in their designing tool of choice, and then they would send that design off to another location to actually produce the physical sample that then gets sold into the business itself. And if somebody needed to change just one little bit of the products, let's say we wanted a green stripe instead of a white one, then you would have to start from the beginning and go back and lose valuable time because you're having to work with a very physical process. And that can waste time. Often the designers are in one part of the world and the manufacturing or the production of those samples is in another part of the world. And yes, shipping has gotten faster over the years, but it's not quite as fast as what you might get if you're able to turn those items into digital sell-in or to be able to create digital prototypes. And so what we're seeing from a lot of those forward-thinking companies is they're taking the ability of those materials, fabrics, they've got them together, they're digital. Well, why not go through a prototyping that actually allows me to take advantage of those digital libraries and create a prototype in 3D and to use that to sell in my product. Then if we need to change a little thing here or there, one stripe, a different color, we can have that done in seconds or minutes probably, rather than days or weeks. And so with the multiple rounds of review and approval that happens directly with these objects, you know, you're saving a lot of time when you can make changes almost instantaneously. And again, what we show here in our example is related to a product, a physical product, but this also goes across the board, whether you're talking about the layouts to then sell that product or your point of sale collateral that is used to market that product itself, okay? And again, very traditionally, review and approval processes happen on printed paper with markups and pins and passed back and forth from your creative to your proofing and your copy and your review. If you can get that down into a digital process, you'll be able to save a fair amount of time. Okay, and so if we take a look at some of the benefits of that, as I said, your designs are more accurate. You have access into the data for your various inventory supplies. If you need to make changes based off of what's available, you can quickly do that because you've got relevant inventory information. you've sped up your prototyping and can do that buy-in and that sell into the rest of the business in a fairly quick manner. And again, at this point, you're using common DAM use cases. So, you can use digital annotation, review and approval, workflows to go ahead and get that process under control. Okay. And so if we take a look at our previous workflow, now we still have our designer, we still have our renderer, we have somebody approving it, but now we can actually share it with the prototyper, the product designer. And that product designer can go into the system just really quickly, download the zip file because they need to work locally and on their own desktop because of the the sheer size of the applications. And so they download a zip, yes, but they have access to the latest and greatest zip file and the latest and greatest materials file that is available for that actual texture and file itself. And then what they can do is they can take their designs and they can actually upload it into the system to actually create renderings and 3D renderings. And apologies, when it comes to webinars, it's kind of difficult to rely on a live demo, and so I don't necessarily have the ability to rotate here, but this is actually a 3D rendering that in a live instance you would be able to rotate around and take a look at. And you can see that we've created a product. It's on a fairly messed up floor here for sure, but we've got some shoes that we can go ahead and send along to the modelers to actually create the sample for that. And in here, you can actually get a better sense for the preview of the texture. You can actually feel, if I put my hand up onto the screen, I think I could get a good sense for the canvas that it is actually going into this, okay? And again, I have my rendering 3D. I can rotate, move it around, see how things are looking, make modifications relatively on the fly to be able to collaborate with people downstream for me. And as I mentioned before, just like with any other DAM process, you can actually involve your versioning and your standard DAM capabilities. So, really kind of take advantage within a versioning on your prototype. How amazing is that to be able to go back and forth on a product and say, no, I want the one that we showed yesterday. Chances are something else, the physical product may have been destroyed as part of the process. So now you have a historical record that you can go back to. So, again, we've taken two somewhat related processes and then optimized them individually, but then added them together to really create a quicker process as a whole. So now we get into our third strategy, which is to consider going into deep integrations of processes. And what I mean by this is, when we looked at this slide, Derek mentioned not only do we have the step that is involved, we're creating photo shoots or photo studios with the images themselves. Well, guess what? When we're in a photo shoot, chances are we have access to data from something like a PIM or a PLM. So our product information systems that have data about, this is my jacket, this is the SKU for that jacket, this is the color that jacket comes in, these are the sizes, this is where we're manufacturing it, this is when it'll be available. So we have all of this product information that we can now tie into the actual photo shoot images themselves. And what that does is it really enriches the content to bring home the fact that you're not just dealing with images or talent or what have you, you're dealing with other data points that go along with this, probably data points that you already have in your business already. So again, you can look at integrations with data as the objects. We're all familiar from a DAM perspective of having an image or a video or a layout as an object. And what we think within here is that if you consider with your integrations that your data is your object too, then you can really make things smart. And by that, I mean, you make it available for downstream users, okay? And by that, It's whether you want to be able to find an image to reuse, because now you've tied talent information and contractual information with an image itself. So no longer having to redo photo shoots because you don't know when your talent contract expires. Well, chances are you have that contract in a rights management system or in some other file share or content management system. Well, if you can connect the data points from that contract into the image itself, and if you need to find out where all of these images with a particular product or talent are located, well, now you can do a search on that information because it resides within your system. Okay. What you can also tie in are some of the more contextual data points of the creation. Who created it? Who worked on it? What was the production company involved? All of that information has relevance for next. And we'll talk about that here in this next point when we look at the historical insight. And what I mean by that is, let's say that we want to do a similar jacket next year, or we want to go with another supplier. We can take a look at what they have created for us in the past. We can check and see what information, how did they do? Did that campaign work well? Did we have problems with the photo shoot itself? We have that information more than likely in some sort of way, whether it's through annotations on the images or in some sort of production digital binder, if you will, within your DAM. Another way that this becomes incredibly useful is, let's say that you are a makeup company and you want to understand what formulations you used in the past. Well, you can very easily do a search for that lipstick that you created last year to understand the formulations that were used and how many times you had to go through various processes to get to that exact formulation. Okay. And so here are a couple of examples that I've talked about a little bit, but we'll show you in action and what it might be and how it might be executed within a DAM. So within this record, I've created a talent record. Again, our data can become objects. In this instance, our talent data has become an object within the system. And I can put who it is, what my start dates are. You can add multiple metadata values to this if you need to. But what I can also do is I can actually create a link to that contract within here. Yes, you can make sure that you have permissions involved here so that only the relevant people who need to see the contract can. And again, this is a screenshot, but if I were to go ahead and click on the preview, I could actually preview the PDF of the contract directly within here. And where that becomes useful is if I need to see and make sure that the images that we're using are actually holding to the contract and are executed according to the contract itself, I can have a view that is searching throughout all the content and showing me every place that this contract has been applied. You know, Serena, one of the greatest of all times, she wins something, we want to congratulate her. We can find out what images or what campaigns or what objects related to her actually exist within the market today. Okay. Another way, and we talked about this, is when you're creating your product, oftentimes you have data points in some other product management system, whether that's a PIM or a PLM. And what you can do is you can actually pull in that data directly into your record. Again, data is object. This is a product object. It is my Extreme Jacket 4000. And here I've got information as to what the e-com description should be, what the web description should be, any of the features and my SKUs, etc. And by having this information here, I'll show you where we can actually link it to other objects in the system. And so just like with the view that we had on Serena, the talent record, we can have the same sort of views available to us here with the product record, where I see the photos where this product is used. I can see the videos where this product is used. Okay, so really kind of connecting not just the data, but the content and the creative or the product itself. Okay. And then what happens, because I've created those connections, I don't have to duplicate information all over my dam. I can have a single point where I've got my my product information directly within that Jacket Extreme 4000. If I click on this, it takes me directly back to my product record. And if I need to, I can use this kind of as a way to kind of stumble upon the content that I need. It may be that the only thing that I know is that I have the talent record for Serena, and now I need to find out all of the other information. I can go to where I know the information to be able to, in essence, browse through the system, okay? And what we also have here is the ability, like I said, to kind of link some of the other information and to create those relations directly to each other. All right, so you really kind of taking advantage of everything that you have at your disposal to kind of condense that life cycle of the product or the creative within your organization, okay? And I think, you know, we've gone through those all very, very quickly, but I think you can kind of get a sense for where we're trying to not cut corners, but to create efficiencies within your processes themselves, to not to fix what ain't broke, as the saying goes, but rather to take advantage of those things that are within your tools, in your tool set, to be able to gain efficiencies.